Hey guys, how you guys doing?
Good. How are
Good,
you?
man. Yeah, very good.
It's been
What's
ages.
happening?
It's been ages since we last spoke, didn't it?
Oh, been a long time
All right.
without you, my friends.
Feels like ages when you're stuck at home and like doing
Oh,
nothing.
yeah.
What are you guys getting up to,
Except
actually?
watching
How
a
are you
whole lot of
passing the time?
movies.
Yeah? Anything in particular?
Star Wars. Just got my girlfriend into Star Wars, so she liked the Empire Strikes Back. So dropping down on one knee, doing the duties now.
Yep. It's the last ticket sorted,
That's it. That's it. It's last ticket sorted. I'm good to go. Well, we good to go.
You're not imagining you with Nick. Imagining like just a whole list of like cons. It's like no. Other side, like likes Empire Strikes Back, whatever it's
Strikes
called.
Back.
Just tick. Here we go. That's all good. Counteracted. It's like a cheat code, you know.
Yeah.
Nick's finally got one more person molded to watch Star Wars.
He has. He molded me, actually.
He was trying to mold
Yeah.
me, but you know what happened, and then
Well, I can't even remember. Oh well. Oh well. It was a failure. Let's just say that
it was a failure. So what does this bring us to? I think it brings us to the hot pot.
Very
that we
punny.
have.
Topic of the topic today is to failure or to not.
Mm.
What you guys think of the title?
Like to be honest, like it's like that Arnold thing. It's like to be or not to be, like.
Yeah.
I was like harnessing my inner Shakespeare while writing that like headline for the video. Like train to failure or to not, you know?
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, I like the name as well. That's cool.
I'm actually on the thumbnail. We could just have some like freaky shit as well. Like we could just have some person just like trying to squat, having like his leg fall in the air and just break in half, and really get some good views going. You know?
You want Tom Platz in there?
Jesus. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Ass to grass.
Ass to gas.
Ass to
It's a
grass.
good looking squat.
This got some good looking. Well, let's start off, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So, basically, yes, as we said, the topic today is to failure or to not. So we're just going to run through. Basically, I want get basically what the definition of failure is to you guys. So, just based on experiences, based on research. If you guys have some things that you want to talk about. But yeah, we'll start off there. So Conor, just give us a brief or just. Is brief the right word to say in these conversations that we have? But yes, just a definition of what you think failure means.
My life.
Next. No.
Okay, so
That's good.
guys,
Our
just to make sure everyone knows, we're going to talk training specifically. All right, so
Okay.
training in the gym. Yeah, we're gonna go there. Not,
I understand,
Not about
okay.
life. Yeah.
That's the podcast for later on. My bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got my 10 o'clock and 9 o'clock appointment confused.
Right.
Right. So we're talking about obviously all things related to gym. So failure is what I describe as just the stage where you can't do anymore. So it's usually a gauge of intensity, like to be more precise, relative intensity. So you can define it a bunch of different ways. You can do like once your form starts to break down, that could be what one person considers failure. The stage where anyone with bad form just can't get another rep, that can be considered failure. You even see in like the bodybuilding world and a few other just, hard trainees and people who enjoy that stuff doing beyond failure. Like, you keep going until you can't get a partial rep or even control an eccentric. So, but the way I probably define it best is, the way I define that's probably best relevant to like trainees and trainers is the stage where you can't get any more good quality reps. We also deal with like the other part of the equation. So if we consider failure at the end of the spectrum, people also do things such as like reps and reserve. So if they knew like they went to true failure, they can do 10 reps and then they did 8 reps, they did 2 reps in reserve. So that's also called like an RPE 8, and it's something we'll just, talk about throughout the podcast. So good to have a base.
Yeah,
Right,
get some
next?
good insights in that. And did you covered up here? Yeah, did you cover that as well?
Really briefly. So RPE, like in the sports science world, there's a weird gauge of like 6 to 20 going from hard to very hard. But particularly for, I'd say powerlifters in particular, who probably use RPE the most, it's like an RPE 9 out of 10 is basically saying you could do one more rep. An RPE 8 out of 10 is saying you can do 2 more reps, and it works back that way. They'll even do funny things like saying RPE 8.5, which is their way of saying, look, I couldn't get 2 reps, but if I did one more rep, wouldn't be my absolute like failure. Like there's a point in between. So, but then again, people are like, okay, I did like RP 7.12345 on my right pec, but the left tricep had like an RP of 2.12. Like it's probably not worth getting into, you know? So I think for just like, yeah, can you do another rep or not? I think reps and reserves is the way to go. RP is a bit outdated.
Yeah, cool. So for my definition, basically, I think we're going to have this common saying if Conor starts off every time, you know, he just pretty much sums it all up. But, you know, just to go over those topics, you know, it's as Conor was saying, you know, that positive failure. So just the last rep that you do before losing form, execution, range of motion, all those kind of things. So that's one way I use to define it. The other one is just going complete failure. So, you know, Conor was briefly talking about reps in reserve there. So whatever your 0 reps in reserve, and that being defined as the last rep that you can perform, you know, good form with, complete failure is going, you know, beyond that. Even progressing like another way of looking at failure is probably, you know, eccentric failures or extended failures, or even, you know, neurological failures and things like that. So there's so many different, you know, terms that you can use to discuss failure. But we'll really dive deeper into this podcast. But Prantik, how do you define failure?
I want to speak about it from the weightlifting point of view. So when you're lifting, I know it has been covered as well, but I want to say that suppose you're doing incline dumbbell presses, and you're doing on the 20 kilos on each hand, and you're doing 12, you're repping it out till 14. So there will be a time when you will do the same, and there'll be lactic acid buildup on your muscle, and suddenly you see the thing that was easier at the beginning of the set is not so easy when you're nearing count 14 or when you're at 12, and then you need someone's help, or then you won't be able to lift at all. So I think that's failure. And when you do beyond that, and I feel that's something that you guys are defining as beyond failure. So probably you take someone's assistance, or you go to the Smith machine and then push it out. Smith machine is a perfect example of going to reps beyond failure, because that's where the cables that are tied to the Smith machine helps lift the bar up and gives you a little bit of support. So that's my definition of achieving failure. And I feel like, as the great Arnold Schwarzenegger said, when you achieve that failure, that's when you're actually working. So the last 2 reps of the set, the 12th and the 14th rep, or whatever reps you're doing, the last 2 reps are the ones that count. And but don't mistake me here saying that the last 2 reps with bad form counts. No, the last 2 reps with good form is the ones that counts, and is the ones that are responsible for giving you the pump in the body. So for example, the pump in my bicep is from all the last 2 reps that I do. So kind of a build up.
Just to go further in that topic too, like when you're thinking about that, so are we talking about, you know, when you're reaching failure, for example, it's the last rep that you can't reach a concentric contraction doing? I mean, this is where the topic can dive deeper and deeper down. Like, you know, after you reach a point where you can no longer do concentric failure, you then have the extended sets where you have a spotter might be able to lift it up, and then next minute you go into a, you know, eccentric failure, or even drop setting, or, you know, just like, you know, any kind of drop setting techniques that you want to add to it. Like I think the definition is how far can you really take failure, you know, and what are its applications? When's it useful to do these type of training techniques? So cool. All right. Next point. So we have here, what are the intensity thresholds? Conor, do you want to basically go over that topic a bit here?
Yeah, okay. I can give you the boys in the lab kind of perspective on this one.
Yes, cool. All right, guys,
All right.
tune into this motherfucker.
Okay, so with intensity, because talking about failure is really just a sign of intensity. With intensity, there's something called absolute intensity. So that's like your percentage of 1 RM. And then there's something called relative intensity, which is how close to failure you are.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of like, I think this podcast, again, we're still trying to figure out what our audience is. So we could be speaking to people more like, Gen Pop. We could be speaking to powerlifters or like people more into bodybuilding. And that would change where these thresholds are. But we know that, if you're quite new to training, anything is enough like for you. You doing like a 3 out of 10 set is more than you doing a 0 out of 10 sitting on the couch. So you will get adaptations there in first. But once you've been trained for maybe a year, you start to see that with absolute intensity, so in terms of getting stronger, there's a lot of value to anything above 60% of your 1 RM. But I guess with more of the hypertrophy thing, that does have a little bit of a place for like mechanical tension. But the main predictor is more that like relative intensity, so how close you are to failure. So what do you see there on the whole, on average, with hypertrophy? You see there might be like a little bit of adaptation at like the start of the set, but not that much bang for your buck. If you're doing a 15 rep max, reps 1 to 10 don't really do that much. Like they do a bit, but not that much. More so going from like 4 reps in reserve all the way to failure and potentially beyond. That's when you start to get the most of the adaptations through the set. I'll show you guys a graph, but I guess our audio-only viewers might struggle with that. But imagine like a exponential equation, if you guys know what that looks like. Basically, you start the set, and there's only so many adaptations, but as you get closer to failure, it starts to move up and up and up. So
It's like a parabolic curve.
I don't know what that word is, Prantik. I like to sound smart, but I don't know what the hell that shit means. That's probably a good way of describing it. I'll trust that curve and hope it doesn't look like a dick. So that's roughly the guidelines you see in terms of like research and the like. And probably fair to say that the more advanced you get, those numbers like / proximity of failure might change. But I guess that'll be more of a topic for later on. So Prantik, I might jump to you. Have you found anything in the gym? Like, have you noticed you went from training a certain way that maybe wasn't so intense in terms of your set, and maybe you're shown, higher levels of intensity closer to failure? And what did you find? Like, did you get stronger? Did you get more muscular? Did you get weaker? Yeah, what did you find?
So this takes me back to the days when I first started working out, when I was a noob at working out, and when I was trying to figure out what exercise hits what muscle groups. And when we all started in the gym for the first time, we had no idea what was a dumbbell curl. I mean, everybody has an idea what was a dumbbell curl, but probably inclined bench presses, correct form for deadlifts and stuff. I don't want to go into those for a longer time, but I want to come to intensity threshold. So the intensity changed from a period when I was just starting to a period when I was getting on stage for actual serious competition. So I feel there was a huge difference in my intensity as my gas tank built up. So by my gas tank, I mean my lung capacity, my capacity to move more weights, correct movement of more weights, what I would like to say. And when I was reaching that intensity threshold, I felt that with better training and with better food, obviously food is also related to it. What, Conor, you asked the question that you asked me, what were you getting stronger? I was actually feeling that I could get stronger. So the person I was in January when I was prepping, when I didn't even have prep on my mind, just a relative example, where I would do 60 pounds worth of presses on the dumbbells, 60-pound dumbbells, each hand I would do a chest press. That changed when the time I was competing. That changed to 120 pounds. That was my highest. And I still repped out about 8 correct ones and then 2 in really bad form. And this was when I was training under a professional, and then I had that professional person stand behind me and help me out as well. So intensity threshold kind of depends on the mindset, I feel. It is kind of inclined towards mindset, and with training, experience, better food, which obviously is better diet, and correct form, can take you from lifting what you're lifting now to lifting double in a matter of few months. And this all is keeping safety in mind. I'm not saying that make it an end goal that you have to lift double of what you're lifting. Uh, Setting end goals are good, but I never knew that I would be able to lift double than what I was lifting back in January. So uh, I feel like it's a lot dependent. This intensity threshold that we are talking about is a lot dependent on the surrounding atmosphere, uh, what you're eating, how you're working out, um, and stuff like that. There's a lot of things. I know you guys better know it. Hydration, nutrition, all these are
All
also,
your recovery adaptations, yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
is something that counts up to. It's like the legs of a tripod,
Mm.
that makes the tripod stand up. One leg is short, then the tripod will bend slightly. So stuff like that, was that a good definition of what Connor was looking for?
Hey, it was handy to know. It was handy to know.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Nick, on intensity thresholds?
Well, going from experience at the moment. So, I think right now, due to whole COVID thing, I think intensity intensity in training obviously has just gone down. Nowhere. Connie, you're talking about training at that 60% of that submax range. That basically I'm not able to lift as heavy as I normally do, or train necessarily as hard as I usually do. In the past, of course, you have open to a gym, you've got access to absolutely everything, but at home I can tell you at the moment, it, so my thoughts have changed a little bit, especially in regards to the way I look at failure now. I was talking about tempo and everything before, and I think when you're looking at training, I think when you're training to failure, I started like processing thoughts. Okay, well, what am I trying to do here?
Mm-hmm.
All right. In the past, it's always like, what's the most amount of weight I can lift for this particular exercise, especially the beginning. Like, you're just trying to be a hero. That's one thing. But as you get more and more advanced, obviously you start to learn how to grow, how to progress week to week and so forth. Now at home, okay, I'm like, all right, I've got 20 kilo dumbbells, all right, and I'm trying to do chest press. Obviously, I can do this, but what I'm now focusing more on, what I'm trying to maximize more on, is that control tempo. I'm like, okay, how far can I take this set, right, where I can no longer do this tempo anymore? So I can no longer go 3, 2, 1, maybe pause at the bottom for 2 seconds, 1 second contraction, and then 0 pauses at the top and stuff like that. Like, how long can I do that for? How many reps can I do that for? And what I found was, obviously I'm not able to do as many reps. I'm probably not be able to do as many sets to start with. So all of a sudden, what was, something I could, if I just kind of go as fast as I can, I could probably definitely punch out 50 or so reps. But the moment I change one little thing, the whole workout changes for me. And so that's something I've been playing around with at home, because that's really all I have access to. But I guess that kind of ties into our next point, actually. Just like, what are the benefits of submaximal training? Or can we twist that and just say, what benefits can you gain from submaximal training? I would say the crucial benefit is just really good execution of exercises. There's obviously so much you can do with heavy weights, to the point where it is becoming neurologically demanding, and therefore tempo just it's there, but it's kind of out the window.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're going into that submaximal range, you can really dive into the execution of the exercise, and next minute all things change in regards to your sets, reps in reserve. Like, that just obviously becomes a lot smaller than what it was necessarily before. That's kind of been my outlook of things, especially at training at different intensities at the moment. But yeah, that's been my experience as of late.
Right, so I'm probably going to absolutely chat for 50 hours in this one. So, submaximal training, just really quickly, I mentioned that from 4 reps in reserve all the way to failures, we start to see most of the muscular benefits. For the strength side of things, I will quickly add, because a lot of its technique component is partly like just neuromuscular coordination and efficiency and things like that, you can benefit from like literally 7 reps in reserve, those kind of things. And it's been studied. You can actually get stronger from that stuff. But on the topic for hypertrophy, so what you see from this 4 reps in reserve all the way to failure and potentially beyond, you got 2 main factors looking at it. What kind of stimulus will it give us on an individual set basis? And then how much fatigue will it cause us? So something from 4 reps in reserve starts to give adaptations, not as much adaptations as failure or beyond, but it does not bring much fatigue with it. I think the best sweet spot on average is around 2 reps in reserve, what you see. So at that stage, it depends on the movement and a few other things, of course, and where you are in your training, but that's probably the highest stimulus to fatigue ratio, for a quote that like Mike will tell terms. But it's not to say you should be there all the time. So one of the principles we're dealing with was a topic we talked about last week, was progression and progressive overload. So there'll be phases where, okay, 2 reps in reserve might not give you the same stimulus. You need to move to 1 rep in reserve and to 0. The only drawbacks of going to failure, I'd say, in terms of just limitation is, what was I saying? And the drawback going to failure. Yeah, it's amount of fatigue and how it affects the rest of the workout. So you go to failure on set 1 of one exercise, it's going to hurt the performance of the next one. And maybe that's fine. Maybe it's something you don't really mind. But if you're trying to add up, okay, how can I do the most effective stimulus? So magnitude of stimulus that I can recover from across the whole week, you'd find that probably the average sweet spot is around 2 reps in reserve. It means, I'll give an example. So if you had, again, 3 exercises for 1 set, or you have 1 exercise for 3 sets, same principle. You go to failure at 15. So both examples, what you're doing is your 15 rep max. You go to 15. Usually if you followed that, if you went to failure and went truly to 15, you drop off a bit more. You might get 12. And then considering that's failure, you might get something like 10, we'll say. So that's 15 plus 12 plus 10. That's 37 reps across the 3 sets. When you're 2 reps in reserve, the first set will be 13. But because like there isn't as much lingering fatigue, you might only drop a rep. And then the set after that, you might only drop a rep again. So it goes 13, 12, 11. So what was that up to? That adds up to 26. So it's less reps in the first one, but the first one generated a bunch more fatigue. You go to the next exercise, because you're a lot fresh now, and the 2 reps in reserve, you're going to perform at a higher average again. You get 13, 12, 11. Whereas a failure one would get something more, okay, you wouldn't be able to do the true 15 rep max anymore because they went to failure. And that affects fatigue levels and how much you can produce force. So now they get like 10, 9, 8. And point being, in isolation, it's always more beneficial to go to failure. But across the weeks, that's where the benefit of submaximal can have its advantage. It's more of like, okay, we won't win the battle, but we'll win the war style thing. But I guess in terms of benefits and drawbacks, finding where it best fits for you is usually dependent on where you are. So if you're learning more technique based, if you're early on in the mesocycle or whatnot, it might be more value because you'll get a little bit of gains, but you don't have to cash in the ace card of going to failure or beyond. But as you get more, progressed or more advanced, even in a big scale picture, there's probably more value to cashing in that card because suddenly the things before that worked just won't cut it anymore because of your.
Back to what you were saying before. When it was actually, that was a really good point you labeled. About say those people that tend to train 0 reps in reserve, if that first exercise is taken to failure, and that can kind of be a little bit detrimental to basically the rest of the workout. Hey, can you give me an instance where, or basically just a simple workout, how that could actually work, and be another example of a workout where that will just be completely stupid and ridiculous. So just an example of where the first exercise can taking a failure can actually be a good thing for the remainder of the workout, and be, you know, where it's bad. And like just to give an example.
I feel like metabolite training, I'm not sure if this is the exact thing you're after, but metabolite training where you try and get like a lot of lactic acid, maximal pump, that can probably benefit from failure the most, because it might be like almost a different perspective of training where you're almost just trying to do the least amount of reps possible for maximum burn lactic acid and pump, rather than the most reps around possible, because it can kind of cause fatigue, especially because it's at usually a lower absolute intensity threshold, the thing we talked about before. So anything you can do to kind of keep it in that really burny, nasty mode. So you could say set to set drop off, like that example before, or you could also do something more like a drop set, or like a rest pause, or like a cluster set. And there's variations to, okay, because I did my maximal set, then I can just keep tapping away, those my rep style things, where you just keep like the thresholds and how far away from failure, very small. So you're spending most of your reps naturally in 4 reps in reserve to failure, because you don't be wasting those other reps. Other times where it might not be as much of an advantage is probably when you're more concerned about how the rest of your workout will go, or your session the next day. It all depends on recovery. You can make going to failure work if you do low volume and a slightly lower frequency. Submaximal, you probably will need to do more volume. So that might be an example when you're in more of a volume phase. Submaximal might have more of a consideration, because it's more of a what I can do across the week perspective versus what I can do in this set. But yeah, probably again, just as I was saying, depends on where you're at with your training. Are you in like a low volume phase? And it's probably more merit and value to doing higher intensity if you're looking for adaptation. But if you're on like a medium to higher volume or strength or technique thing, there's probably more value with submaximal.
So now giving a real person experience. So say take, for example, someone like Dorian Yates, who obviously is renowned for training or taking things to absolute failure, right? Could you say that although the guy was a monster, he was huge, you know, one of the best physiques ever, but it could have been better, like if he actually trained, you know, like let's say leaving reps in reserve and actually having, for example, accumulating more volume, for example, or taking, you know, like more sets of things closer to failure? Or how could you make that argument?
Maybe slightly. Again, it's really hard to argue the results, to be honest. That's a person that really maximizes potential in a lot of ways. I think Gowd even makes a statement. He would argue to himself that maybe you should have pulled back at certain times as well. Like things like nearing shows. If people know their bodybuilding history, he torn his bicep and tore his tricep, like in a few of the Olympias just beforehand by going like too maximally hard a few weeks before the show. But you could argue that same thing that hurt him there and made him more likely for injury was also part of the factors that made him as great as he was in the off-season and earlier levels of pre-contest, you know. It's just probably the wrong strategy at the wrong time. So we're talking about like stages. Another factor is when now we're talking about the really big guys, those guys, the amount of volume they can handle is not as much, because it takes a lot more recovery capabilities to recover a 40-inch like round quad of like a big Rami versus a, I don't know, 12-inch like calf of someone smaller. Like there's more.
Is that why you see a lot of them
recover?
Is that why you see a lot of them like literally, like, I wouldn't say a lot of them, but you do see some of them, like some of the bodybuilders out there, like not really training like that close to failure. Like it's almost like they're just kind of chasing pumps or just, you know, submaximal training, like in science terms. So, like,
yeah, I guess sometimes.
Like,
tell me if you see this as well. You get like, this is like the stereotype. So obviously it's stereotype's not 100% true, but you see like the classic California pro, and we're talking about Tom Platz before, this is not him, but the guy that just like does a few like curls of like biceps, chats to chick, just checks the abs out in the mirror, probably not doing enough intensity, you'd argue, but the stereotype is usually they got the genetics, the pharmaceuticals and the food to support suboptimal training.
What do you mean by pharmaceuticals?
Just, you know, Nurofen and like paracetamol and stuff like that, you know.
Okay, got you.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we can ask someone else what that means, you know. Yeah, so those guys, look, often, okay, people are where they are not because of what they do, but actually in spite of what they do. Like, it's more so like I'm sorry to call out Sean Rhoden, because it's the first thing that comes to mind. He can get away with some of those adaptations because he's got amazing structure. It's not because of the sheer amount of muscle mass he's continually been able to gain year after year. It's like he gets the newbie gains, he gets like the early pharmaceutical newbie gains, and like the true muscle mass hasn't like, you know, really exploded year to year like that you see with some of these more progress oriented people doing. So I guess it really depends on the person, the mindset, and really, honestly, how seriously you can take it and what you can honestly get away with. Like, sometimes it's not about like what's maximal, what the hell can I just do to survive and just get through things and rely on other things, you know. Sorry, Sean Murray.
No, so sure, yeah, having a dig, love it. Cool. All right, so when you're looking at all this from a broadest perspective, how for example, let's take you. How would you plan over the course of a workout? Like, how would you structure, you know, your failure points, like from workout A to E or whatever, leaving reps in reserve, or how do you structure that? Or is basically every exercise, okay, I'm going to be, you know, it's typical kind of Mark Israel kind of style of training. So, you know, week one of the training phase, pretty much all exercises are going to be left 3 to 4 reps in reserve. And then over the course of the mesocycle, we're going to drop to 3, 2, 1 and add sets where we need to and things like that. Is that that's his way of doing things, but how would you kind of do that? How would you structure?
How do I organize it? Yeah, how do I structure it? Do you say in the week or in the workout?
Like, start off with a workout.
Okay. So a big factor of what would I do is, again, like I was saying before, maybe might not be what is optimal, but what do you enjoy? Maybe that's something we kind of skipped over. It's so boring to talk about adherence all the time. It's like, oh, well, it's got to be enjoyable. You got to stick with it. But it's kind of true, you know? So look, I kind of enjoy the kind of pushing yourself beyond belief style things here and there. But the reasons for doing that all the time aren't purely physiological. It's what else it can bring to your life. Like, you know, you can overcome this. How does it translate to the rest of the day and what else you can achieve? Kind of cliche thing. But how I do it in an individual workout, you got to almost zoom out to like, okay, what are my goals of the week? You zoom out again. What are my goals for the month? What are my goals of the year? So if you said the year is to gain muscle, there might be times where there'll be phases where you expect to grow muscle, and might be times around maintenance. So if you're in one of the more growing phases, which I'm guessing the context is you're talking about, you've really got to line up that principle of progressive overload somehow. So making sure what you do is going to give adaptations to make sure you can do for screw up the sentence. Basically, what you're trying to do is make sure the workout you're doing is going to make you progress forward. And how much you need to do, again, changes depending on where you are. I'm going to use a random example, your week 4. So like, let's say like if you had a 4-week accumulating 1-week deload paradigm, which is somewhat common, not for any magical reason. If you did like, 4-week, you know, accumulation in the 4th week and you're going, you got the deload next week, it might be a more beneficial time to structure the training session as failure. Because what I talked about with like, training to make sure you're good next time. Well, the next time is a deload. The whole goal of it is to get rid of fatigue. Fatigue was the main cock block of failure training anyway. So you're kind of removing that cock block because you know the cock block's going to be gone in the next week. Whereas like if you're a bit early on the mesocycle, I want to progress, but I want to make sure I'm progressing the week after as well. And that's where you'd probably tie into something a degree more submaximal, just something that better plays those ratios we're talking about. You know, if you're trying to factor into like how will I go next week? The equation is pretty much on one side to making me better, how many adaptations / potentiated / activated your nervous system is. And the other side, you're mainly looking at like, injuries or fatigue. So whatever you can do to kind of tip that equation up to make sure you're better next week is the right answer. And it kind of depends because, again, sometimes fatigue is a big consideration and other times you're more fresh. So on average, I think towards the end of the workout, you could argue in terms of structuring a workout, the end of the workout is probably more valuable to do something closer to failure and maybe grab those benefits because, well, you haven't got anything to do after. you allow fatigue to dissipate, you know. But it probably depends on the movements as well. It's a bit more dangerous to go to failure in certain things, you know, than others. Like I wouldn't recommend doing like eccentric failure, like good mornings and stuff like that. It's like low-key scary. But if you're doing a leg extension, like what's the harm, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus. I remember a couple of years ago, you and I did that. It was a couple of years ago, last year, I can't remember. We did a training phase together where good leg workout, pretty brutal, pretty much all throughout. But the end was like a triple drop set Bulgarian split squat, and literally taking every set to failure. And luckily, it was at the end. like to be honest, I don't even think Conor got to his other leg, but he was on the ground for like 25 minutes.
Oh my God, that was the worst, man. I was like freaking out. I'm like, I'm going to die, man. I'm freaking going to die.
like imagine Prantik, you got lactic acid that builds up and that lactic acid just doesn't want to leave. It's just there.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Thank you for making it halfway through our show.
You have listened to us. Now you can see how we do it.
Visit our YouTube page, linked in the description below for more information.
Prantik, I'm actually curious to ask you these questions too. So before you left Australia, you were working with Josh Lenartowicz. And he basically had you on, you know, his training plans and things like that. So curious. So what was your workout week kind of look like for you? How were you what were your ways of progressing week to week? Not just about progressing. Let's talk more about, you know, training each exercise and how close to failure we're going and things like that.
Well, I would like to start this with the famous saying, "Swole is the goal, size is the prize. Let's go!" All right, now, jokes apart, Josh Lenartowicz is an excellent professional at training people. So he can be found at www.trainwithjosh.com or joshlenartowicz.com. And, well, matter of fact is I'm still working with him, but it's not as intense or as frequent as it was back in the day. But Josh is a really good friend, a big brother to me, and his training pattern really opened my eyes towards training and training properly, like a proper training. It was not like the fact that I was not training properly before I met him, but you know, every person has their own style to train a different person because of the experienced eyes they have. So it's probably from all the experiences he has gathered from his past trainers, his days of competing, and he's still competing, and other experiences that he has going around the world. And I feel like as Nick asked, what was the training pattern like? So this is where progressive overloading is. Josh really focuses on progressive overloading. And I feel like he studies the body type, or he studies his clients to be, like in the lack of a better word, he studies his clients first, and then he susses out, is that the word, right? Susses. And then he susses them for what type of training regime does their body fit into. I think that is primary in realizing what type of training you should be doing. And then he sets the training pattern accordingly. Now, be this online or in person, it's always the same. He will definitely check you out first to see what kind of training you can adapt to. And in most of the cases, which I was adapting to, was progressive overloading. And it worked miraculously for me. I mean, progressive overloading, by what I mean, like, he had a workout week program. In these 4 weeks, you would be progressing, you would be actually descending from starting from 14 reps on the first week of every exercise, every body part you do. You rep it out till 14 in a moderate to heavy weight as your body as you can lift, I would say. And then slowly moving on to 14, 12, 10 and 8. 8 was the 4th week, and according to his training regime, and which is the guaranteed regime, by the time you reach your 4th week, and 8 reps, you'll be able to lift more. And that is science. You will be, because your muscle has been exposed to so much intensity on the first hand. When you're at 12 reps and you're trying to rep out that 60-pound dumbbell, that your muscle will slowly get used to that 60-pound dumbbell being your warm-up when you're doing the 8 repetition week. So that's when I feel like failure changes with the training pattern that you have. So what was failure for me in week 1 is a starting weight for me in week 4. You get me? So thing like that, and I felt like that was a new eye opener to me. I never had this. I always thought that 60 pounds is my failure on my chest press, but I never knew I could grow more. Obviously, there are other stuff. There's pharmaceutical, food, other stuff. I had headaches, so I always used to take those Nurofen and stuff like that. Conor said. So, but definitely, I feel like that's where it all changed, and I feel like a person never. This is where I wanted to say a person never really knows what his failure is until unless he explores exercise pattern that is going on around. And I think I remember this. I think it is from one of Mountain Dog's training, where he says. I think this is Lee Priest. Yeah, Lee Priest says this. He says, try all sorts of training. Try giant sets, drop sets, super sets, stuff like that, and see what works out for you. And I feel like it's correct, because doing all these type of trainings, you will be able to find out what your failure is. And then you might be able to change what your failure is. If you're failing at dumbbell curls at 30 pounds, you might be changing that failure into failing at 40 pounds. You might never know. And then what do you achieve by doing this? You achieve growth. That failure threshold, when it goes high, that's when you achieve growth. And I feel that's how I have trained always with Josh. And I've always kept the training in my mind. And till today, I'm still training like that, where I always give myself that 4-week kind of phase. And obviously the diet changes every month, and then I try to see what's working for me. So yeah, and the physical presence also changes. Your physique will change with that 4-week type of thing, and that's guaranteed. Like, I can guarantee you, with progressive overloading, you will see changes. Until unless you're super lazy at the gym, you go in there with your phone. Let me update a Facebook status. Let me see what Sarah is doing. Let me ask her out and stuff like that, like stupid things. You don't want to do that, but you want to go into the gym, focus on your training, keep a mindset. As Conor said, obviously set up goals, not only for the week, not only for the hour later, but also for the end of the year, what you want to look like. So for a person who wants to be on stage, end of the week, end of the year, he would be like shredded and sliced and shredded with every muscle peaking. Focus on that peak and stuff like that. So if you're trying to lose weight, that should be your probably 3 pounds, 4 pounds in a month. That should be your end goal, monthly end goal. Every month I'm going to lose 3 pounds until you've achieved your target weight. If you're trying to get stronger, as Nick trains, Conor, you train as well in that format where you try to get stronger every week. I guess you guys have an aim every week that, okay, this is the weight I moved this week and in a safe fashion, and this was my failure rep. This is where I failed. And next week, that rep changes, and that might be in the middle of your workout where your previous week's failure rep is, and then you're pushing past it. So you've broken the threshold already, which was there last week, because your recovery has been better, your food is better. Obviously, credits to Coco Pops for that, and then you go beyond, and then by the time you reach 4th week, as I say, you'll see that the weight you are lifting on the first week has become your kind of warm-up weight. I won't exaggerate it to that limit, but I would say it's kind of a weight that you can deal with rather easily than the weight you're currently lifting to achieve failure. Was that put in a good way?
Yeah, no.
I like it. Perfect. I think one part I want to ask Nick about, because you kind of, with the Josh Lenartowicz periodizing approach of working reps down, I think one of the cool parts with psychology as well is like it's not as demanding every week to go to like, maybe 8 rep max was a bit more scary, as well as you build momentum. Like you can see, again, reps coming down, the weight's probably going up week to week because you can do more for 10 than you can for 12. But you get that momentum. And I know Nick has trained under like Sebastian Oreb style programs, who's pretty like in the powerlifting side of things, definitely more on the submaximal side of things, but he's also built big on building momentum. Can you speak to any of the like mental benefits or how it makes you feel with your training when you can't get that momentum, Nick?
Yeah, it's funny because I was just thinking about all that. Because speaking of that, so when I'll go into this topic first too before I get into the whole Sebastian Oreb style training program. So I've trained similar or other ways of powerlifting style training where let's say I would use the reps in reserve kind of sticking like point, shall I say, where I go, okay, let's go 3 reps in reserve and let's just progress here. I can tell you I fucking hated it. I fucking hated training like powerlifting style and aiming for 3 reps in reserve or 2 reps in reserve. It, to be honest, like I felt like form would break down. I felt like, here's the hard part. If you had a shit week, as in like you just felt terrible. Everything was just like, blah, right? And you know that on these particular exercises, you got to hit 1 rep in reserve. Like it was stupid. All right. And for me personally, I hated it and I didn't stick to it for long enough. Okay. I gained really good momentum with Sebastian Oreb style program when I followed something for 16 weeks. All right. And for me, I sometimes get bored of, similar training styles like quite quickly. But for this, I stuck it through for 16 weeks. Right. And basically at the time, I still am, but I was really interested in the whole. Sebastian Oreb. What's really good about him is he's a good coach. He knows how to coach people technique. He knows how to like look at that. He can look at you and just really basically get your form on a squat, deadlift, bench press a lot better. It's just one of his great things he can do. So when I started that program, basically it was 4 weeks of training just within those 5 rep ranges, and you're doing this for 4 weeks, and basically you're taking a squat, deadlift, bench press, and overhead press, for example, 5 sets of 5 or 4 sets of 5 depending on if it was a deadlift across 4 weeks. The 4th week you deload on the amount of sets, but the intensity still remains high. So his belief was, okay, all right, well, we're going to drop volume. Volumes are probably going to be the major thing that creates fatigue. Instead of doing 5 sets this week, we're going to go back to 2 sets or 1 set. All right, can you push through it? And in my mind, I was like, well, fuck yeah. Like whenever I got to that 5th set, even if it was week 2 or 3, I was like, this is now feeling it, right? We'll be doing 180, or 170 squats, for 5. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'm really, really feeling it. But I knew if I got to the 4th week, okay, I know I can definitely do 1 set or 2 sets of this and I'm good to go. And then boom, a new phase starts again. It might be a slightly different variation of that squat technique. But in my mind, I was like, okay, I gathered momentum by going, all right, I can smash this hard for 3 weeks, use that deload, take that refresher. Yes, it was heavy. And that was a good thing I liked about it. I liked the fact that in my mind, I was still training hard. I was still training heavy, but I was kind of in and out of the gym quite quick. And I kind of left the gym thinking, oh, I can do more. But that's the point of a deload anyway, right? You want to leave thinking, shit, I can do more. So that's what good adaptations I got from it. But it's just, to be honest, it's nothing magical. It's very linear in terms of the way the beginning starts from week 1 to week 16, volume's at its peak, right? And then as you progress further and further and further along, obviously intensity increases, like peaking for a show. Intensity increases, weight goes up, volume dips down. We're not required to do as much, all right? And then, to be honest, in my I just had the most amount of strength gains coming from that, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, when I compare that to, like I said before, reps in reserve, like I think reps in reserve definitely served me better through hypertrophy training. But through this, yeah, like I said, like Conor talks a lot about, you know, adherence and things like that. Yes, it sounds so fluffy, but I tell you what, if you're trying to follow a system that, and you're kind of looking at it, or if you've written out yourself and it just doesn't tickle your fancy, fuck, seriously, like, yeah, you're gonna quit, give up, and probably not head back in the gym for another month just because you're just sick of things.
Yeah.
You know what, I've definitely been down that avenue before, but I know specifically for powerlifting style training, that's what I've enjoyed. And that's how I like it. Yeah, like I said, like I kind of get bored of things quickly, but once you get a roll going, and once you kind of get a good, you know, good habits going in, and you know, start videoing your stuff, start videoing your technique, start getting someone else to assess it for you, start looking at those little things as your ways of progression. Because yes, it is sub maximal. You're not getting anywhere pretty much close to your you know, your 1 rep max, but it's the little things that matter. Right. And those little things like spreading the floor with your knees, or, you know, pulling your elbows back, pulling your elbows. Conor, you want to say it? Pull back hard.
Knees out, knees out. What is it again?
Yeah, I can't remember. Pull back hard.
He has a few things.
Yeah, he has a few things he loves to say. But yeah, so like, does that answer your question in regards to how, you know, what I've enjoyed in momentum gathering? Yeah. So that's from my powerlifting experience. Now, since my knee injury, I haven't really been able to do that. And not just my knee injury, since we haven't been able to go back in a fucking gym. It's really hard to do all that shit. So at the moment, I'm doing a lot of basically what you can just call but I've been able to do a lot more metabolic type work. So like literally, my failure point is creating a lot of systemic fatigue when you think about it. So when you're training to failure, it's that feeling of, you know, exhaustion and things like that. So get into those deeper ends of failure, which is cool. It's fun. It has its benefits, especially coming back, going into the gym, going through a little phase like that. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm enjoying it. I'm sticking to it. So that's what matters, right?
That's right. Yep. Second advertiser, take note. To tie things full circle, I think it's definitely value in, like Prantik said, and like finding what works for you and doing a bunch of different things, but also like tying into intensity and failure points. It's definitely valuable at some stage in your career. Progress with somewhat earlier on, even if it's not the perfect thing to do in terms of what's the best strategy. So probably go more towards those failures. So you know what it looks like. You see weird things in research. People think they're going to failure, but actually like 8 reps in the tank, like things like that. So it's good to actually know, or else what you think is 2 reps in reserve is actually bloody 9. But then with that, like Prantik said, you'll find that, okay, if I do failure, I might have to do this much volume, like Nick's talking about with his peak things with like Sebastian's programming. You try out these different things, you see how the results go, and then when you struggle to keep making results, hopefully that's the point of our podcast. It's like, okay, I enjoy these different things, I'm learning about these different methods, and then you watch our podcast last week on progression and what to do when you're actually enjoying the stuff but you fit the sticking points. So we look into these principles and how to progress them and all the like. But I think my big message I'd give to the viewers, like taking almost a takeaway, is do the intensity thresholds that are needed, so long as you enjoy them, and then how you choose a program for the your volume things or frequency that kind of tie from like higher or lower intensities is kind of secondary to making sure it's something you can adhere to long term, and then you can go into all the funky stuff from there. But yeah, really make sure you know where it is, so you can get a good honest assessment on it, and then find what works for you in that sense.
True.
Beautiful. Great takeaway. Love it. All right. Well, I pretty much think that's a wrap, guys. I reckon we've done pretty well this time. We I'm shooting my toot my horn here, but I think we all deserve to give ourselves a clap here. Well done. That was great.
Conor doesn't clap. I don't think he's done well.
Thank you for watching the Forge podcast. If you enjoyed it, we'd love for you to subscribe. If you want to find out more about us, check the description. And as always, thank you for listening.